I'm going to review an ultra-wide angle lens. I'm going to film the review in ultra-wide angle, except this looks terrible. That's better. No, this just looks like a bad music video. I'm just going to go get a standard zoom. Welcome back, DP Review TV viewers. It is Jordan Drake to talk about the new Laowa 12mm T2.9 Zero-D cinema lens. Now, this lens has been around in a stills version for a while, but this is a proper video version that's been rehoused. Now, this is really exciting because if you look at all of your cinema lens kits, and sometimes they'll go down to 18mm, 15mm, you don't get a lot of ultra-wide angles, so you might be looking for one that you can add to your kit. The other cool thing is this covers full-frame sensors, and we're seeing a lot of those right now. Ultra-wide that covers full-frame sensors and is pretty inexpensive. It's definitely worth taking a look at. Now, I'm a huge fan of ultra-wide angle lenses for photography, but they are a little bit more restrictive, a little bit more of a niche tool when you're shooting video for one major reason. If you have an ultra-wide lens, especially 12mm on a full frame, and you move the camera, you're going to see that the edges of the frame move way faster than the middle of the frame. It's very distracting, draws attention to the fact that you're using an ultra-wide angle lens. So where I really like to use these perspectives is to accentuate the weirdness, so you can make things that are quite small look enormous. You can really emphasize something that's important. This is a trick that Breaking Bad used all the time. The other trick is you can use that very fast sense of speed when something moves close to the lens to accentuate the sense of movement. So you can get a really cool effect with these lenses, but it's not something that I would recommend throwing on a gimbal or throwing on a slider. That sense of motion is going to be really distracting for your audience. Okay, so you've given it a little thought and you're like, yes, I do need some ultra-wide shots in the project that I'm working on. Then you're probably wondering, well, what's really going to differentiate the stills version from this new cine version of it? And some of them are fairly obvious. This is geared on the focus and the iris, so you'll be able to hook it up to a follow focus unit. On top of that, we get a very long, beautiful focus throw. Now, this is something you might even like for photography, since these are all manual focus lenses. Makes it very easy to get extremely precise focus. And for video, it's much easier to mark if you do have to do a manual focus pull. Now, on the front here, they do have an adapter available to work with matte boxes, but you need to make sure it's a pretty big matte box. Most 4x4 ones will actually vignette. One other great thing about the cinema version of this lens is it's rated in t-stop, so you can tell how much light is actually being transmitted. This is really useful if you're using multiple camera setups or you're trying to match with another shot. The other really great thing is that we do have a stepless aperture on this, so you can very smoothly shift your exposure. Now, unfortunately, this is not optically redesigned. So what that means is when you're pulling focus on it, there is still a fair amount of breathing. Now, in the ranges that you're typically pulling focus, say from one actor to another, you're not really going to notice it. If, however, you decide to pull focus from something very close, and this has amazing macro on this lens, to the background, you're really going to see that frame stretch. All right, so what does the Zero-D in Laowa Zero-D 12mm lens stand for? It stands for zero distortion. Now, there is still a little bit of it, but if you've got a straight line in the middle of the frame, it does a really nice job of keeping that controlled. However, this is going to have a lot of perspective distortion, and it's not because this lens is flawed, it's just if you're shooting an extreme wide angle and tilting it up or down or moving the camera side to side, things are going to look a little weird because that's not how our eyes see the world. But very well corrected, especially for this price point. I can hear you screaming at your screens right now. I don't need to be told how to use this lens, Jordan. Just tell me if it's sharp or not. Let's do that. It's a pretty sharp lens. So I shot on an S1H in 5.9K to take a look at the center and the corners of it. So we shot the center at T2.9 and T5.6, and you can see here, it sharpens up a little bit, but honestly, shooting 4K, I don't think you'd notice a huge difference there. The corners, however, when you're shooting at T2.9 are quite soft. So if you're shooting a wide detail shot where you need all the information in the frame, I would really recommend stopping that down to T5.6. And honestly, it's very sharp from that point until you get to about T16, where diffraction obviously starts to rear its ugly head. However, at T16, you do get some pretty nice sun stars with this. One thing that can be a real concern is, I mean, look at the barrel on this thing. Anytime you have any light, it's going to be hitting it, and occasionally you'll see weird flare patterns, and it's tough to gauge where they come from. So if you plan to use this without a matte box, you have to be very conscious of that, and you will get some ghosting if the sun is in your shot as well. If you're panning the camera, again, that can be fairly obtrusive, which is why I tend to use this lens in pretty static shots. I know I've spent a good chunk of this episode telling you when not to use a lens like this, but when it's used correctly, it can give you a really powerful, unique kind of image that you're not going to get any other way. So I do think it definitely has a place. As well, it's not that much more expensive than the stills version of it, which is not generally the case when you're looking at cine housed lenses. So if you're the kind of person who already has a set of cinema lenses, or especially if you're renting out a kit, this is a no-brainer to add. It's very inexpensive and it is very capable in those niche situations where you use it. If you're waffling between the stills version and the cine one, if you're just a single operator, honestly, the stills one is still a great option. But if you plan to use it with a follow focus unit, matte box, then for $500 extra, I do think it's worth grabbing this. Very unique images on this, and optically, it's an excellent lens. Hopefully you found this short review useful. And don't forget, if you want to see some more video-centric stuff, be sure to let us know in the comments. And don't forget, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for a whole lot more DP Review TV coming soon.